Hi, and welcome to today's Daily Chronicle. Today is Friday, October 25th, 2024. Come hell or high water, early voting is happening in storm-ravaged North Carolina. A woman holds a sample ballot on the second day of early voting at a polling station, October 18th, in Fairview, North Carolina. Despite concerns about early voting access after Hurricane Helene, many local officials reported record turnout for early voting. Mary Beth Tipton has two stickers on the wall in her office that sum up what it's like being an elections official. One's a smiling, flaming cartoon dumpster that says in all caps, "It's fine, I'm fine, everything's fine." The other one is a circus tent, and it says ringmaster of the "We'll just let people take a guess" show. Tipton laughed. She's been the elections director in rural Yancey County, north of Asheville, for a dozen years, including during the pandemic, and thought she'd seen it all. When Hurricane Helene came and devastated western North Carolina with torrential flooding, everything changed. Yancey County, home to about 15,000 voters, is one of the communities hardest hit by the storm. In the final countdown to the election day, the presidential race is top of mind for many Americans. But in Yancey County and across western North Carolina, election season seems like a foreign concept for people left picking up the pieces. Tipton said it was hard coming back into the office the first time after the storm. But soon after she walked in, the phone started ringing off the hook. There were questions about how to send a ballot to far-flung areas people evacuated to. There were preparations to make and polling places to check on. One building washed into the river, and others were used for aid distribution and sheltering. On the first day of early voting last Thursday, voters showed up in record numbers, and Tipton quickly remembered why she was there. "This is one normal thing I can give my voters, the ones that have lost everything," an emotional Tipton said during an early afternoon lull. "You wouldn't believe the people that's come through here today that said, 'I don't have a home, but they're here to vote.' This is one thing that we're not taking away from them. We're going to see it too, that they do get to vote." There are 11 precincts in the county with various states of readiness for November's election day, with assistance from the Federal Emergency Management Agency and some distribution sites clearing out. I have requested 6 tents from FEMA, and what they'll do is they'll come in with power generators, heat, porta-johns. It's got a floor. It's awesome, she said. I have find a footprint of 60 by 100, so that way we can set up the tent in those areas where we don't have anything. As of Wednesday morning, just under 3,000 Yancey County voters cast their ballots in person, including more than 700 on that first day. How to campaign after a hurricane? You don't. While there are Herculean efforts to make the voting process business as usual, campaigning has taken a back seat for both parties and campaigns. Driving through the main roads around Burnsville, the county seat, you see more logos for aid groups like Samaritan's Purse with candidate signs. Many that weren't washed away in the storm were removed by locals not wanting politics to be a focus. Johnny Deaton is a character of the Yancey County Democrats and said last week they would normally be calling folks to remind them about early voting and offer rides to the polls. "The way it is now, we have no telephone service, no landlines in Yancey County are operating," he said. "And the older residents of this county don't believe in cell phones, so we're having a tough time communicating. What little communication that has made it through has focused more on making sure people are safe, fed, and taken care of. We vote 70 to 75% of the population. The registered voters would be lucky to get within 60%, he said, because people do have more concerns than voting. They're still without power, still have a tough time getting around." Dayton is a lifelong local with ties to the community that are stronger than the bridges and deeper than trees that were washed away by the storm. He was one of several people who gathered at the party headquarters last week to take a break from the new reality around them and to grieve. I know just about every person that lost their life," he said. "They were good friends of mine. They were part Democrat and part Republican. but they were all good friends of mine. Politics has put on the back burner, even for local candidates who could use all the support they can get. Jim Parlier is a Democrat running for county commission who lives in an overwhelmingly Republican area of this overwhelmingly Republican county. But his campaign and his viewpoints didn't matter when it was time to clear debris and move past the worst of the flooding. It didn't come up, he said. I have farmer neighbors who have bulldozers, and they were clearing the road when I was pulling brush from their chainsaws. We didn't worry about who was in which party. You could call the shift in Yancey County bipartisanship, but it's more like an anti-partisanship that will likely linger far beyond November's election. I really think that because it's going to be a long recovery, a couple of years at least, that we're going to stay together the way we have, Parlier predicted. He said he wanted to run for office to help people, and he's been heartened to see how much the last several weeks has been neighbors helping neighbors, going on with cleanup and distribution of aid. He's worried about what happens after the outside attention wanes. I think we need to continue to feel the love, Parlier said. I think we need to realize that from our helpers, both here and from the outside, that we're great big hugs. That's what all of us need, and certainly me. Campaigns pivot to GOTV to help those in need. Hugs notwithstanding, there is still an election going on, and both presidential campaigns are in delicate position, trying to balance relief efforts with encouraging people to vote in a state that both Vice President Harris and former President Donald Trump need to win. At an early voting site in Rutherfordton last week, Republican National Committee Chair Michael Whatley, himself a Western North Carolina native, said the party is using its resources to reach people with helpful information. This is about the families in North Carolina, he said. This is about the people of North Carolina first. That is obviously our highest priority, and we'll deal with elections in a distant second. The Harris campaign has also stepped into overdrive to deliver supplies to affected communities and to ensure people know their voting options. Even though well over 1 million people have already voted in North Carolina, and even though North Carolina State Board of Elections passed rules to make voting easier and more flexible in Western countries affected by the storm, Yancey County Elections Director Tipson is still worried about making sure her voters can cast their ballots. But actually seeing that the people are interested, seeing them show up, and seeing them turn out. That's what I do this for, she said. It's them. That's what you do. You provide it to your voters. Apple and Goldman Sachs ordered to pay $89 million over Apple Card failures. The Consumer Finance Protection Bureau has fined Apple and Goldman Sachs $89 million. Pictured is the Apple logo hanging in front of an Apple store in Chicago in March. When Apple announced it was launching Apple Card in 2019, it promised a new kind of credit card that was designed to help customers lead a healthier financial life. Now, government regulators say Apple and its partner, Goldman Sachs, caused harm to hundreds of thousands of cardholders by mishandling disputed transactions and by using deceptive marketing practices. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, a federal agency, has ordered the companies to pay a combined $89 million in penalties and redress to those affected. The CFPB has also banned Goldman Sachs from launching a new credit card unless it provides a credible plan that the product will comply with the law. The companies violated consumer financial protection laws through the practices related to Apple Card, said CFPB Director Rohit Chopra in prepared remarks on Wednesday. This led to wrongful charges, mishandled disputes, and damaged credit reports. The CFPB says the companies harmed consumers by failing to process disputed transactions, meaning cardholders were unfairly held responsible for the charges. Goldman often failed to investigate the disputes. Apple did send damaging cardholders' credit reports, the agency said. The companies also marketed interest-free financing if people used the card to buy Apple devices, but many cardholders who had expected to be automatically enrolled were instead charged interest. An investigation by the CFPB found violations of the Consumer Financial Protection Act and the Truth in Lending Act. These failures are not mere technicalities, Chopra added. They resulted in real harm to real people. The CFPB fined Goldman $45 million and ordered it to pay $20 million in redress to customers. Meanwhile, Apple was fined $25 million. When it launched, Apple Card represented a new push into consumer lending for both the tech behemoth and the Wall Street giant. But the CFPB describes a rush to launch the card despite an array of problems that ultimately hurt users. In statements to the NPR, both Apple and Goldman Sachs defend the card as consumer-friendly. We work diligently to address certain technological and operational challenges that we experienced after launch, and have already handled them with impact to customers, said Nick Carcaterra, a spokesperson for Goldman Sachs, adding that the company is pleased to reach a resolution with the CFPB. Apple said it had worked closely with Goldman Sachs to address the issues and help customers. While we strongly disagree with the CFPB's characterization of Apple's conduct, we have aligned with them on an agreement. We look forward to continuing to deliver a great experience for our Apple Card customers, said an Apple spokesperson. Apple is reportedly in talks with other banks about taking over its credit card program from Goldman Sachs. Jailed reporters silenced networks, what Trump says he'd do if the media if elected. Former President Donald Trump often basks in the glow of press attention. Just as often, he trashes the press and threatens journalists. On the campaign trail and in interviews, Trump has suggested that if he regains the White House, he will exact vengeance on news outlets that anger him. More specifically, Trump has pledged to toss reporters in jail and strip major television networks of their broadcast licenses as retribution for coverage he didn't like. It speaks directly to the First Amendment, and the First Amendment is a cornerstone for our democracy. Federal Communications Commission Chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel, a Democrat, tells NPR. To be clear, the government does not license national networks like those targeted by Trump, but the FCC does license local TV and radio stations to use the public airwaves. While the FCC has authority to provide licenses for television and radio, it is pretty fundamental that we do not take them away because political candidate disagrees with or dislikes any kind of content or coverage. Rosenworcel says, Trump's declarations arrive at a time of increasing concern about his more autocratic impulses, and press advocates say he is intentionally fueling a climate hostile to independent reporting. 1 in 3 journalists say they faced a violence or the threat of it. President Trump has a campaign for free speech. Everyone was safer under President Trump, including journalists. A spokeswoman for the Republican National Committee wrote to NPR in response to questions about these concerns. Even so, a new survey of hundreds of journalists who received safety training from the International Women's Media Foundation finds a 36% say they have faced or been threatened with physical violence on the job, and they have felt especially threatened at Trump campaign rallies. Journalists reported feeling at high risk while covering Trump rallies and Stop the Steal protests, especially when some Trump supporters and protesters openly carry weapons, the report says. While campaigning for Republican congressional candidates in 2022, Trump repeatedly pledged to jail reporters who didn't identify confidential sources on stories he considered to have national security implications. He joked that the prospect of prison rape would loosen reporters' lips about their sources. When this person realizes that he's going to be the bride of another prisoner shortly, he will say, I'd very much like to tell you exactly who that was. Trump told an appreciative crowd at a Texas rally, and Trump said he wouldn't limit to the reporters, the publisher too, or the top editors. He made the same claim 2 weeks later at an Ohio rally. Threats to investigate TV networks and take them off the air. Last week, Trump called for the NBC News to be investigated for treason over its coverage of criminal charges he faces. After his lone debate with Vice President Harris this summer, it was ABC's turn to face Trump's wrath. Trump expressed anger over moderators' decision to fact-check him. He popped up on Fox and Friends the next day with a warning. "I think ABC took a big hit last night," Trump said. "I mean, to be honest, they're a news organization. They have to be licensed to do it. They ought to take away their license for the way they do that." This month, Trump has been back at it, slamming CBS repeatedly over its handling of the vice presidential debate and in the network's interview with Harris on 60 Minutes. He pointed to two versions of an answer Harris had given, one that aired on 60 Minutes and the other on the show Face the Nation, to argue CBS was deceiving viewers to aid the Democrat. "Think of this," Trump told attendees at a rally in Aurora, Colorado. "This month, CBS gets a license, and the license is based on honesty. I think they have to take their license away. I do." And on Sunday, Trump repeated his complaint to Fox News' Howard Kurtz. "It's the biggest scandal I have ever seen from a broadcaster," Trump said. 60 Minutes, I think it should be taken off the air, frankly." CBS and 60 Minutes rejected the claim that the network had deceitfully manipulated Harris's interview because it had shown a shorter excerpt of her answer to the same question on 60 Minutes. The portion of her answer on 60 Minutes was more succinct, which allows time for other subjects in a wide-ranging 21-minute-long segment, and in a statement Sunday evening. Again, news organizations do not need licenses to operate, unless they are local TV or radio stations. The parent companies of CBS, ABC, and NBC own more than 80 local stations among them. All three declined to comment for this story. A vow to bring an independent agency under the president's control. The Federal Communications Commission was set up 90 years ago as an independent agency. While Rosanne Worcel was appointed chairwoman by President Biden, she is not subject to his directive or that of any president. The FCC receives funding and oversight from Congress. Last year, however, Trump posted a video on social media promising to bring the agency under full White House control. "I will bring the independent regulatory agencies, such as the FCC and the FTC, back under presidential authority as the Constitution demands," Trump said, though such an effort would assuredly face a legal challenge. These agencies do not get to become a fourth branch of government, issuing rules and edicts all by themselves. And that's what they've been doing. Several former television network executives, asking for a nominee to avoid getting pulled into the campaign, said they feared the consequences of Trump's stand on pursuing reporters' secret sources more than the threat to pull the broadcast licenses. In recent decades, digital fingerprints have made it easier for investigators to track down contacts between government employees and journalists. Under both Democratic and Republican administrations, prosecutors pursued charges against leakers have sought such records from reporters. After taking office, U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland shifted policy, effectively borrowing the Justice Department's practice for subpoenaing journalist records except in rare cases. At the New York Times, leaders are girding for what could happen under a president more hostile to the media. Devoted a team of member and significant effort to looking at the ways in which the rule of law, protections for the press could be worn away by either authoritarian leaders or by the populist leaders who rally their supporters against independent media. Times executive editor Joseph Kahn recently told NPR's Steve Inskeep, "We shouldn't pretend that we're only vulnerable in a place like Hungary or Turkey. They are also vulnerable here." As President Trump aided allies such as Rupert Murdoch, the founder of Fox News, Trump also tried to punish media outlets that were critical of him. His administration sought to block the takeover of CNN's parent company. It also tried to deny a cloud computing contract for Amazon, which was founded by Washington Post owner Jeff Bezos. "It's the frequency of these attacks on the First Amendment that strike me most," Rosanne Worcel, the FCC's chairwoman, says. As a federal employee, Rosenworcel says she almost invariably refrains from public comment on political matters during election season, but she says she could not let this pass unacknowledged. Similarly, Rosenworcel criticized the threats of prosecution made by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' administration against local television stations that run ads advocating greater abortion rights in the state. The Florida Department of a Health attorney who sent the letters to the Florida TV stations has resigned, saying he was ordered by DeSantis' aides to send the letters. We can't let this be normal, Rosenworcel says, of threats to press independence. If you want to maintain a democracy, you have to speak up for it. South Korea warns it may send Ukraine weapons after North Korea sent troops to Russia. South Korea's president vowed on Thursday to respond to North Korea's deployment of troops to Russia, including by potentially supplying offensive weapons to Ukraine. Seoul will not sit idle to the face of a North Korean provocation that threatens global security beyond the Korean Peninsula and Europe. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol told reporters in Seoul after a summit meeting with visiting Polish President Andrzej Duda. Yoon's remarks followed Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin's assertion Wednesday that the United States has evidence of North Korea's deployment of troops to Russia. Austin did not specify what the evidence was, but said if North Korean troops were to fight for Russia, it would be a very, very serious issue. South Korea's intelligence chief told lawmakers Wednesday that North Korea has sent 3,000 troops, not including special forces, to Russia for training, and that the North plans to increase that number to 10,000 by December. The deployment of North Korean troops could add to concerns that the war risks spilling over and affecting tensions in Asia, from the Korean Peninsula to the Taiwan Strait. South Korea's intelligence agency said last week that North Korea had sent more than 13,000 containers of artillery, missiles, and other conventional weapons to Russia since August 2023. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky warned earlier this month that North Korea is no longer just about transferring weapons, but personal too to help Russian forces. President Yoon pledged support for additional South Korean weapons sales to Poland, including the sale of $7 billion worth of K2 tanks. So far, South Korea has helped Ukraine by providing arms to the United States and Ukraine's neighbors, but he said that could change. We have had a principle of not directly supplying lethal weapons to combatants, he told reporters, but we can be more flexible and review the policy depending on North Korea's military activities. Even if they do fight on the front lines, analysts believe North Korean troops will be regulated to a supporting role in the war. Lee Ho-rung, a researcher at the Korea Institute for Defense Analysis, a government think tank in Seoul, says North Korean troops could be sent to wear down Ukraine's offensive into Russia's Kursk region. The North Koreans will likely be put in charge of security and such efforts, but as time goes by and with training, they may be able to support Russian operations, Lee says. Then it is expected that there will be many casualties during that process. South Korean Defense Minister Kim Yong-yoon told lawmakers Thursday that North Korean troops are assessed to be more cannon fodder mercenaries. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, he added, has sold his people's army for an illegal war of aggression. North Korean state media have made no mention of deploying troops to Russia, and the South's intelligence agency says North Korea may be sequestering family members of troops sent to Russia, possibly to quell domestic discontent at the deployment. Even if the North Korean deployment has limited military value, analysts say it sends important messages to major powers. North Korea has named Russia as its top foreign policy priority, and in June signed a treaty ratified by Russia's parliament on Thursday, which allows for mutual assistance if either country comes under attack. Deploying troops could be seen as cementing that deal. For Ukraine, pointing to North Korean intervention strengthens the Ukraine's government appeals for Western military aid. South Korea's suggestion that it could arm Ukraine is music to Kyiv's ears, argues Yoon Suk-guk, a senior research fellow at the Korea Institute for Maritime Strategy and a retired South Korean Navy captain. South Korea is saying, "We will now stand on the US side and sell offensive weapons to Ukraine. Helps Ukraine," he says. And I think that's ultimately what Ukraine wanted to get from President Zelensky's disclosure of the North Korean deployment. That said, Yoon and other analysts believe South Korea will respond cautiously to any North Korean troop deployment to keep Russia from giving North Korea the military assistance that it seeks as a reward for sending troops. Moscow has warned Seoul not to get involved in Ukraine. It is necessary to think about the consequences for the security of South Korea if it entered the conflict in Ukraine, Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zak said Wednesday. The Russian Federation will react harshly to any steps that may pose a threat to the security of the country and its citizens.